The chamber hummed with the low thrum of holographic displays, their blue glow casting long shadows across the curved walls of the Galactic Concorde's central hall. Ambassador Elara Voss stood at the podium, her fingers tapping a steady rhythm against the cool metal edge. She was human, tall, with sharp features honed by years on frontier outposts, and a gaze that could pin a room without raising her voice. Flanking her were two aides, Marcus Hale, broad-shouldered and ever the pragmatist, his toolkit slung over one shoulder like an old friend, and Lena Torres, the diplomat's shadow, quick-witted and fluent in a dozen alien tongues, her tablet humming with real-time translations. Across the aisle, the Council of Elders loomed in their tiered seats, a mosaic of species from the sprawling Concorde. The Vorshi delegate, a towering figure with iridescent scales that shifted like oil on water, leaned forward, its multiple eyes narrowing. Humanity's petition for sector expansion is premature, it intoned, voice like grinding stones. Your species has barely contained the bioplague on Epsilon Prime. What guarantees do we have that your ingenuity won't unravel the fragile balance we've maintained for cycles? Elara met the gaze without flinching, her lips curving into a measured smile. She had heard this refrain before, endless debates where humans were painted as reckless upstarts, their grit mistaken for chaos. Elder Vorshi, we've contained worse than plagues with less, she replied, her tone even, laced with the quiet confidence of someone who had pulled her team from a derelict station's vacuum breach. Our engineers sealed Epsilon in under 48 hours. Lives saved, ecosystem stabilized. That's not recklessness, that's results. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, a mix of alien clicks and hisses. Marcus shifted beside her, his hand brushing the comm device in his ear, ready to feed her data if the talks dragged. Lena whispered under her breath, "They're stalling. Watch for the Krell vote, they're the swing." The Krell representative, a squat being with tentacles coiling restlessly around its console, raised a limb. "Results, Ambassador? Your ingenuity nearly cost us the Orion trade routes last cycle. A human freighter's malfunction scattered debris fields that took 3 fleets to clear." The accusation hung heavy, and Elara felt the familiar knot in her gut. Not malfunction, sabotage, whispered rumors from rival traders who feared human competition. But proof was elusive, buried in bureaucratic red tape. She straightened, drawing on the stories her grandfather had told of Earth's early colony pushes. Humans who bent physics to their will, not with superior tech, but with sheer, stubborn adaptation. That incident was isolated, and we've since implemented redundancies no other species has matched. Let me show you the schematics. She activated her podium's interface, projecting a crisp hologram of reinforced hull plating, adaptive shields that rerouted power on the fly. The display rotated slowly, a testament to human problem-solving, clever, unyielding. The Vorshi elder waved a dismissive claw, scales flaring in irritation. Schematics do not erase history. The Concorde's pride rests on stability, not your endless tinkering. The vote loomed, and Elara sensed the tide turning against them. Marcus caught her eye, his nod subtle. "We push back or we lose ground." As the session adjourned for deliberation, Elara led her team into the antechamber, the doors sealing with a pneumatic sigh. The air here was cooler, laced with the faint ozone of recycled atmospheres. "They're digging in," she said, rubbing her temple. "Pride's blinding them to the resource shortages hitting the outer rims. If we don't expand, colonies starve." Lena scrolled through her tablet, brow furrowed. "The Krell might flip if we offer joint patrols. Show them we're partners, not threats." Marcus grunted, unpacking a small diagnostic tool to fiddle with, a habit when tension coiled tight. "Partners? They've been stonewalling us for months. One more delay and our supply lines fray. I've seen what happens when patience runs dry." Elara nodded, staring at the viewport where stars streaked past the station's orbit. Humanity's reach had always outpaced permission, but this council with its ancient protocols tested even her resolve. Little did they know the real test was just beginning. A shadow on the sensors, an anomaly the aides had glimpsed during transit, hinting at something far deadlier than politics. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The viewport ahead framed the sprawling orbital station of the Galactic Council, a colossal ring of iridescent alloys that gleamed under the system's primary star. Flanking her were her two officers, Lieutenant Marco Reyes, ever the optimist with his quick grin and steady hands on the navigation console, and Ensign Lila Chin, the cautious engineer whose fingers danced over diagnostic panels, double-checking every seal and thrust vector. Approaching Docking Bay Alpha 7, Marco announced, his voice light despite the tension coiling in the air. Council's welcoming committee is already planetside, prepping for the summit. You think they'll roll out the red carpet or just the usual bureaucratic snarl? Ilara shot him a sidelong glance, her jaw set. She was the brave one, the colony survivor who'd clawed humanity's foothold from asteroid rock and radiation storms. If they do either, it'll be after they grill us on the mining yields. Remember, we're here to negotiate resources, not beg. Her eyes flicked to the comms feed, where the Council's automated beacon droned on about protocols and inspections. Lila leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Sensors picking up an anomaly in the docking clamps. Slight misalignment, could be wear or sabotage. I recommend a manual override on approach. Her caution had saved their hides more than once, back when pirate skirmishes tested the colony's defenses. The shuttle shuddered as it aligned, the station's docking arms extending like mechanical tentacles. Ilara nodded. Do it. Marco, ease us in slow. As the clamps locked with a resonant clang, a holographic prompt flickered to life. Human delegation cleared. Proceed to conference hall via secure conduit. They disembarked into a corridor alive with the murmur of alien voices. Scaled diplomats from the Vexery, feathered envoys from the Etherians, all casting curious glances at the trio of humans in their practical jumpsuits. No fanfare, just the sterile efficiency of the Council's domain. Ilara led the way, her boots echoing on the polished floor, while Marco whispered jokes about the intergalactic DMV, to ease Lila's visible unease. The conference hall loomed ahead, its doors parting to reveal a circular chamber ringed by tiered seats. At the center stood the council chair, a towering Silphari named Zorith, his elongated form draped in robes that shimmered like liquid starlight. Ambassador Voss, he intoned, his voice a melodic rumble, your species' petition for expanded helium-3 quotas is... But the Council's reserves are strained by the nebula storms. Explain why humanity's needs supersede ours. Ilara stepped forward, unflinching. They don't supersede. But without those quotas, our colony's fusion reactors fail. Billions of lives hang on it, not conquest, Chair Zorith, but survival. Marco and Lila flanked her, their presence a quiet show of unity, as the chamber filled with murmurs of debate. Zorith's tendrils twitched, a sign of irritation. Survival? Your ingenuity is renowned, yet you encroach on shared space. The storms have crippled our supply lines, concessions come at a cost. He gestured, and a holographic map bloomed, showing swirling chaos in the outer belts, vortexes of plasma and debris that had swallowed freighters whole. Lila's eyes narrowed at the display. Those storms, our probes detected patterns. Unpredictable, but not impossible to navigate with adaptive shielding. Her words hung, a spark of potential alliance amid the rising friction. Marco chimed in, his wit cutting the tension. If we pool data, maybe we turn those storms into a shortcut instead of a graveyard. Humanity's got the grit, what's the Council's play? The chamber stirred, Zorith's gaze sharpening as the first cracks of negotiation appeared. But beneath it all, Ilara sensed the undercurrent, the Council's pride unyielding and humanity's patience fraying thread by thread. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the shuttle's engines vibrating through her bones as they skimmed the asteroid's craggy surface. The viewport ahead framed a jagged scar in the rock, a mining outpost, or what was left of it after the Council's automated drills had chewed through the vein. Her team, 3 engineers from the colony ship Endeavour, sat strapped in behind her. Marcus, the wiry optimist with a knack for jury-rigging, Lena, cautious and methodical, her tablet already glowing with schematics, and Theo, the quiet giant whose hands could coax life from dead circuits. Scans show the breach is stable, Ilara said, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser. But if that gas pocket ruptures, we're talking a chain reaction. Council says it's our mess to clean up, human oversight they called it. She didn't hide the bitterness. The alien diplomats had dismissed their warnings about unstable volatiles, too proud of their tech to listen. Marcus leaned forward, peering at the approaching lights. Oversight? More like underestimation. Those drills of theirs are fancy, but they ignored the seismic data we flagged. Bet they think we'll just mop it up and smile? Lena shot him a look, fingers tapping her screen. Focus. We've got 15 minutes before the next tremor hits. Theo prepped the sealant foam, double charge it. Theo nodded, unstrapping with a grunt, his broad frame filling the aisle as he hauled the equipment crate. The shuttle banked, dust swirling in the low gravity, and Elara felt the familiar pull of doubt. The Council's pride had escalated this from a joint venture to a test of wills, human grit versus their unyielding protocol. One wrong move and the whole belt could fracture, stranding the colony. As the ramp hissed open, a plume of ionized particles danced in the floodlights, revealing twisted metal and flickering emergency beacons. Elara stepped out first, boots crunching on regolith, the cold bite of vacuum nipping at her suit. Fan out. Marcus, seal the east vent. Lena, monitor the core pressure. Theo, with me, we're bridging the main line before it blows. The group moved like a well-oiled machine, but the asteroid groaned beneath them, a low rumble that set Elara's teeth on edge. Marcus dashed to the vent, his tool arm whirring as he sprayed foam into the hissing crack. Got it, holding at 70%, he called over comms, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow inside the helmet. Lena knelt by a console half buried in debris, her faceplate reflecting the urgent readouts. Pressure's spiking. Captain, the Council's override code isn't responding, it's locked us out. Elara cursed under her breath, kneeling beside Theo as he wrestled with the power conduit. Sparks flew, illuminating the fear in his eyes for a split second. Then we bypass it. Theo cut the secondary relay, manual override. He sliced through the casing with a plasma torch, the blue flame casting long shadows across the pitted rock. Wires sizzled, but the flow stabilized, buying them seconds. The tremor hit then, a violent shudder that hurled Lena against the console, her tablet clattering away. Elara lunged, grabbing her arm just as the ground buckled, a fissure snaking toward them like a vein of lightning. Pull back. Elara barked, hauling Lena to her feet. Marcus was already sprinting, foam canister in tow, while Theo covered their retreat, his massive form a shield against falling rubble. They piled into the shuttle as the outpost's lights winked out, the asteroid settling into an uneasy quiet. Strapped in again, Elara watched the scar recede through the viewport, her heart pounding. They'd patched the immediate threat, but the deeper fracture, the one between humanity and the Council, widened with every ignored plea. Status? She asked, voice raw. All clear, Lena reported, retrieving her tablet. But the veins compromised. We'll need reinforcements, and they won't come without concessions. Marcus wiped his brow. Concessions? After this? Let them see what human hands can do when their pride blinds them. Theo just nodded, stowing the gear, his silence heavier than words. Elara throttled up, the shuttle lifting away from the shadowed rock. The cost was etched in bruises and bent metal, a reminder that patience had limits, and theirs was fraying fast. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle's command chair, the hum of the engines a low growl beneath the tension in the cockpit. The view screen flickered with the asteroid field's jagged silhouette, a graveyard of rocks tumbling in lazy orbits around the neutral station. Her co-pilot, Jax Harlan, leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the console as he plotted a vector through the narrow gap. These Xenos think they're clever, parking their blockade right in the shipping lane, he muttered, his voice steady but edged with that familiar grit. Elara nodded, her eyes fixed on the incoming debris. She'd always admired Jax's calm under fire, the man who could crack a joke while dodging plasma bolts. The comms crackled to life. Human vessel, this is Krellian Enforcer Pride's Thorn. You are entering restricted space. Transmit clearance or reverse course. The voice was synthetic, laced with the haughty timbre of the Krellian overlords, their council's pride swelling like a storm cloud over the sector. Elara's jaw tightened. The Council's latest decree had choked off the vital or shipments to the outer colonies, all in the name of territorial integrity. Her mission was simple: deliver the diplomatic packet that laid bare humanity's counterproposal, or what was left of it after months of ignored pleas. But getting there meant punching through this blockade, a move that could ignite the powder keg. Jax, evasive pattern Delta 7. Let's show them we don't scare easy. He punched the thrusters, and the shuttle lurched, weaving between two house-sized boulders that scraped the hull with a screech of metal. Alarms blared as a Krellian fighter peeled off from the formation, its sleek form cutting through the void like a predator's fin. Elara felt the G-forces press her back, her mind racing through contingencies. The packet in the secure vault held more than words. It was proof of human tech scavenged from the wrecks, innovations the Council had dismissed as primitive tinkering. If they boarded her, it was over. The fighter closed fast, its targeting lock pinging against their shields. Jax's hands blurred. Incoming missiles, 2 no 3. He rolled the shuttle hard, the stars spinning in a dizzying arc. Elara unstrapped, grabbing the auxiliary controls. Reroute power to forward deflectors. I'll handle the countermeasures. Her fingers flew, deploying a chaff burst that bloomed like a metallic flower, confusing the missiles into detonating harmlessly against a drifting rock. Sweat beaded on Jax's brow, but a grin cracked his face. Nice shot, Cap. Reminds me of that scrap over Vega Prime. Elara allowed herself a tight smile. Vega had been their first real test, losing half the crew to Krellian enforcers, who claimed salvage rights on human wrecks. That grudge fueled her now, turning caution into calculated risk. The comms hissed again. Human, your defiance is noted. Prepare to be boarded. But Elara saw the opening. The fighter had overcommit, leaving a blind spot in the blockade. Full burn, Jax. Straight through the heart. The engines roared, propelling them into the fray. Rocks whistled past, one glancing blow shuttering the frame, but they burst free into clear space, the station's lights winking ahead like a beacon of fragile hope. Docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk, and Elara stood, smoothing her uniform. Jax holstered his sidearm, his eyes meeting hers. Think the Council's ready for round 2? She exhaled, the weight of the colony's futures pressing down. They better be. Or we'll make them. As the airlock cycled, the first echoes of station chatter filtered in, murmurs of unrest, whispers of human resolve cracking the Krellian facade. But she knew this was just the spark. The real fire waited in the Council chambers, where pride would clash with patience, and humanity's ingenuity might just tip the scales. Captain Elara Voss gripped the armrests of her shuttle's command chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn synth leather. The view screen flickered with static from the nebula's interference, but the outline of the Council's flagship loomed ahead like a judgmental monolith. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren muttered calculations under his breath, his fingers dancing over a holographic display that projected erratic energy readings. The shield harmonics are shifting again, he said, voice tight. If we push through now, we might destabilize the whole array. Lena, the wiry engineer at the auxiliary console, shot him a glance without looking up from her tools. And if we wait, that pride beast of theirs seals us out for good. Your call, Doc. Science or survival? Her tone carried the edge of someone who jury-rigged too many failing systems on frontier runs, brave in the face of fraying wires and false hopes. Elara's jaw set. The Council's latest demand had come via encrypted burst. Surrender the human colony's mineral rights or face isolation in the nebula's heart. It wasn't just resources, it was a test of wills, their arrogance blooming like the toxic blooms in the gas clouds outside. Humanity had petitioned for equal trade lanes for months, only to watch the alien delegates preen in their opulent chambers, dismissing Earth's envoys as impulsive upstarts. Patience had worn thin after the last incident, the sabotage of a supply convoy, pinned on navigation errors that no one believed. Thrust us in, Elara ordered, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The shuttle hummed to life, engines straining against the nebula's pull. Alarms blared as they breached the outer shield layer, sparks dancing across the hull like fireflies in a storm. Kai braced against his station, eyes wide. Incoming interference, it's modulating to our frequency. Lena was already moving, slamming a panel open and yanking out a bundle of conduits. Not on my watch. She spliced in a bypass from the emergency kit, her hands a blur, sweat beading on her forehead. The ship bucked, a low groan echoing through the frame as the nebulous plasma clawed at the shields. Ilara felt the vibration in her bones, a reminder of the cost. One wrong surge and they'd be adrift, easy prey for the Council's patrol drones. Through the haze, the flagship's docking bay resolved into view, its lights piercing the murk like accusatory eyes. But as they aligned for approach, a new alert flashed, hostile signatures closing from the flanks. Not drones, something sleeker, armed with the Council's precision disruptors. They're boxing us in, Kai said, his cautious nature cracking into urgency. We can't dock under fire. Ilara's mind raced, drawing on the grit that had carried her through asteroid sieges and diplomatic standoffs. Lena, can you spoof our transponder? Make us look like one of their supply runners? The engineer grinned fiercely, even as the ship shuddered from a near miss. Already on it. Give me 30 seconds. Wires sparked in her grip, and she fed the makeshift code into the system, her witty deflection masking the fear. If this works, drinks on me. If not, well, Nebula's got plenty of room for ghosts. The pursuing vessels hesitated, their formations breaking as the false signal took hold. Ilara punched the docking sequence, the shuttle latching onto the bay with a metallic thud that reverberated through the cabin. Airlocks cycled, and the trio spilled out into the sterile corridor, phasers holstered but ready. The Council's guards, tall, iridescent-skinned enforcers, approached with weapons raised, but Ilara stepped forward, chin lifted in defiance. We're here to talk, she said, meeting their leader's gaze. Before your pride chokes the life out of this alliance. The guard's mandibles clicked in irritation, but he waved them through, the weight of unspoken threats hanging in the air. Behind them, the nebula swirled, a vast, indifferent witness to the gamble they'd just taken. One slip now, and humanity's foothold in the stars could crumble, not with a bang but with the quiet snap of strained patience finally breaking. Captain Elias Thorne gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport twisted with debris, shards of the alien frigate that had just exploded in a silent bloom of plasma and twisted metal. His crew, what was left of them, moved like shadows in the dim red emergency lighting. Lieutenant Mira Voss patched the hull breach with hasty welds, her face smeared with sweat and grime, while Engineer Raj Patel rerouted power from non-essential systems to keep the engines humming. Status on the Council's fleet? Elias barked, his voice cutting through the din. Raj glanced up from his flickering holographic display, his usual calm fractured by exhaustion. They're scattering, sir. That EMP burst from our improvised array bought us time, but their capital ship is turning. Looks like they're prepping quantum lances. Elias nodded, the weight of command settling heavier on his shoulders. The plan had been simple. Infiltrate the Council's blockade, deploy the human-engineered disruptor to cripple their sensors, and slip through to deliver aid to the besieged colony on Epsilon Eridani. But the aliens' pride had turned it into a gauntlet. Their vaunted unity, that endless parade of species posturing as galactic arbiters, had dismissed humanity's warnings about the rogue AI swarm threatening the outer rims. Primitives playing its saviors, one ambassador had sneered during the last transmission. Now, with their fleet in disarray, Elias saw the crack in that facade. Mira sealed the last panel with a hiss of cooling metal and straightened, wiping her brow. Hull's holding, but we're down to auxiliary thrusters. If they regroup, we're sitting ducks. Options? Elias asked, eyes locked on the tactical overlay where red icons swarmed like angry hornets. Raj tapped his screen, pulling up schematics of the debris field. We could use the wreckage as cover, piggyback on its momentum to slingshot toward the colony. Risky, but it beats a straight burn. Mira shot him a look, her cautious nature flaring. And if the debris shifts? We're talking kinetic impacts that could shred us. Elias waited, the hum of the ship vibrating through his boots. The colony's distress signal had been faint, looping pleas for the medicine and tech humanity alone could provide. The Council had embargoed it, citing protocol, while their own worlds hoarded resources. No more waiting for their pride to bend. Execute the slingshot, he decided. Mira, plot the vector. Raj, juice the shields with whatever you've got left. As the ship lurched into motion, weaving through the glittering remnants of the frigate, Elias felt the tension coil tighter. A new alert pinged, Council interceptors breaking formation, zeroing in. One clever dodge wouldn't be enough. They'd need every scrap of human grit to turn the tide. In the distance, the colony's star flickered like a promise, dimmed by the shadows of arrogance. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport was a swirling chaos of debris, shards of the alien freighter they just barely outmaneuvered, now threatening to turn their own vessel into scrap. Status on the hull integrity? She barked, her voice cutting through the din like a laser. Lieutenant Raj Patel, ever the unflappable engineer, wiped sweat from his brow and tapped furiously at his holographic display. Holding at 72%, Captain. But that last pulse from their disruptor cracked the outer plating. We're venting atmosphere in sectors 4 and 7. His fingers danced across the controls, rerouting power with the precision of a surgeon. Raj's caution had saved them more times than Alara could count. He never rushed to fix, always double-checking seals and flows. From the navigation station, Dr. Lena Torres shot a glance over her shoulder, her dark eyes sharp with calculation. The xenobiologists would often lighten the bridge during lulls, but now it was all focus. Debris fields expanding, Council ships' remnants are pulling in more from the asteroid belt. If we don't vector out in the next 2 minutes, we'll be caught in the gravity well. She adjusted the thrusters manually, her hands steady despite the tremor in the deck plating. Alara nodded, mind racing through options. The Council's blockade had been a surprise. Those pompous envoys from the United Spheres had demanded humanity's surrender of the uncharted sector, citing some ancient treaty no one on Earth had ever heard of. Pride they called it, arrogance Alara knew. Her crew's small scout ship, the Endurance, was no warbird, but it was theirs, built with human grit and a dash of improvisation. They'd slipped through the outer patrols, but this freighter ambush had nearly ended it all. Divert auxiliary power to forward shields, Alara ordered. Raj, patch that hull breach with the emergency foam. Lena, plot a slingshot trajectory around the largest fragment, use its mass to mask our signature. Raj hesitated for a split second, his cautious nature flaring. Foam's rated for micrometeorites, not a full rupture. It might hold, but if the pre-sure equalizes wrong. He trailed off, already initiating the sequence. No time for debate, they trusted each other to adapt. The ship groaned as the foam deployed, a chemical hiss echoing through the comms. Alara felt the vibration in her bones, the Endurance protesting like an old friend pushed too far. Outside, the debris loomed, a jagged moonlet tumbling end over end, its surface pitted and unforgiving. Lena's trajectory lit up the NAV screen in green arcs, dipping perilously close. Engaging burn, Lena announced, her voice laced with that dry humor. Hold on to your seats or whatever passes for them in 0G. Thrusters fired, slamming Alara back into her chair. The viewport filled with the rocky behemoth, so close she could make out individual craters. Alarms spiked as a fragment clipped their flank, sparks erupting across the hull. Raj cursed under his breath, rerouting life support to compensate for the new leak. They cleared the mass, emerging into clearer space, but the victory was short-lived. Sensors pinged, 2 more Council vessels closing from the flank, their elegant spires cutting through the stars like predatory insects. Alara's jaw tightened. The initial plan, to rendezvous with the human colony on Epsilon 4 and rally defenses, had backfired spectacularly. The blockade was tighter than intelligence suggested, and now they were low on fuel with comms jammed. We can't outrun them, Raj said flatly, scanning readouts. Shields at 40%. One solid hit and we're done. Lena spun her chair. Then we don't run. That freighter's wreckage, it's got antimatter residue. If we detonate a controlled pulse, we could create a false explosion signature. Make them think we bought it. Alara weighed it, the risk gnawing at her. Antimatter was volatile. One miscalculation and the Endurance would be vapor. But surrender wasn't an option, not with the colony's fate hanging in the balance. The Council's pride had blinded them to human resolve. Now it was time to show what patience could forge. "Do it," she said. "Raj, rig the charges. Lena, keep us steady. We're not falling today." As the engineer scrambled to the engineering bay, tools clanging in his wake, Ilara stared at the approaching ships. The stars blurred slightly, the ship's strain mirroring her own. This gambit might buy them time, but the cost was mounting. Another scar on the hull, another drain on resources. And if it failed, the Council's envoys would claim their prize, underestimating humanity one last time. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plating, a constant reminder that the Endeavour was limping, not sailing. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she scanned the tactical display. The alien fleet, those sleek iridescent ships of the Council, had pulled back just enough to regroup, their formation tightening like a noose around the human vessel. Scans showed energy signatures building. They weren't done yet. "Status on the shields?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She glanced at Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the chief engineer, who was patched in from below decks via a flickering holofeed. His face was smudged with grease, eyes sharp behind the overlay of diagnostic readouts. "Shields at 42%, Cap. We rerouted power from life support to buy time, but another hit like the last one." Marcus trailed off, wiping sweat from his brow. He didn't need to finish, they all knew. The Council's plasma lances had already carved gashes into the hull, venting atmosphere in sections 3 and 5. Ensign Kira Novak at the helm twisted in her seat, her fingers dancing over the controls. "They're fainting left, ma'am. If we adjust course to 247 Mark 12, we might slip through that debris field from the asteroid belt." Elena nodded, appreciating the young pilot's quick thinking. Kira had that cautious edge, always calculating risks, never charging blind. "Do it. But keep us nimble, I don't want to get pinned." The ship groaned as thrusters fired, weaving through the scattered remnants of shattered rock. Alarms blared softly in the background, a chorus of warnings about failing systems. Elena's mind raced. The Council had summoned humanity to this neutral sector for diplomatic talks, but pride had turned it into a standoff. Their ambassador had dismissed human tech as primitive, refusing aid when the Endeavour's core drive malfunctioned en route. Now, with the fleet blockading their escape, it felt like a test they weren't meant to pass. A proximity alert cut through the tension. "Incoming torpedoes, 304. Kira shouted, banking hard. The deck tilted, sending unsecured tools skittering across the floor. "Countermeasures," Elena ordered. From the weapons station, Sergeant Tomas Ruiz punched the release. Flares burst from the Endeavour's underbelly, blooming like fiery flowers against the void. 2 torpedoes veered off, detonating harmlessly in the debris. But the others closed in relentless. Marcus's voice crackled over the comm, "I'm sealing bulkheads in the forward bays. If they breach..." The first torpedo struck amidships, a thunderous jolt that rattled Elena's teeth. Lights flickered, and the hollow feed from engineering stuttered. Red warnings flooded the bridge. "Hull integrity compromised, secondary power offline. Report." Elena barked, unstrapping to steady herself as the ship listed. Kira fought the controls, her face pale but focused. "Lost maneuvering on port side. We're drifting toward their line." Tomas swore under his breath, reloading the point defense guns manually. "Guns are hot, but ammo's down to 30%. We can't outgun them." Elena straightened, her resolve hardening like forged steel. Humans didn't fold under pressure, they adapted. "Marcus, how long to jury-rig the warp coils for a short jump? Even a blind one? 10 minutes, maybe 12? Risky as hell, could tear us apart. Better than waiting for them to finish the job." She turned to the crew. "Kira, plot a course through the densest debris. Tomas, buy us time. We're not their trophy today." As the Endeavour shuddered under fresh fire, Elena watched the Council ships advance, their hulls gleaming with arrogant precision. But in the heart of the storm, a spark of ingenuity flickered, human grit against alien hubris, and she intended to fan it into a blaze. The debris field loomed closer, jagged shadows promising cover or catastrophe. Kira's hands steadied on the yoke, and the ship plunged in, buying precious seconds. Deeper into the rocks, the Endeavour twisted like a dancer in a gale. Shards pinged off the hull, each impact a spark of friction against the reinforced plating. Elena's breath came even, her mind mapping contingencies. The Council's transmissions had gone silent after the initial demands, "Surrender your vessel for inspection." But she could almost hear their smug calculations, assuming human frailty. A new alert pierced the din, energy spike from their lead ship. Tomas yelled. "It's charging something big, a beam weapon." Elena leaned forward. "Evasive pattern delta." Kira thread the needle. The ensign complied, the ship corkscrewing through a narrow gap between boulders the size of city blocks. One torpedo grazed the edge, shearing off a sensor array in a spray of sparks. The bridge console sparked, acrid smoke curling up. Coughing, Elena waved it away. "Ventilation." Marcus's feed returned, his voice urgent. "Coils are aligning, Cap. But we need to dump the overload capacitors first. 5 minutes to clear." "Too long." The Council's beam lanced out, a searing line of violet energy that sliced through the debris, vaporizing a chunk of rock perilously close. The shockwave buffeted the Endeavour, alarms wailing as inertial dampers strained. "They're hurting us," Kira muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. "Pushing us into open space." Tomas fired a salvo, the railguns barking defiance. One Council fighter crumpled, spinning away in flames. A small victory, the dim hum of the auxiliary engines filled the cramped cockpit, a relentless drone that matched the pounding in Alex's temples. He gripped the console, knuckles white as the viewscreen flickered with the encroaching debris field, a graveyard of shattered hulls from the Council's last demonstration of power. Mia hunched over her toolkit beside him, her fingers dancing across exposed wiring, sweat beading on her forehead despite the recycled air's chill. "Patience is a virtue they don't teach in alien academies," Alex muttered, his voice low but edged with that familiar grit. He glanced at the comms panel, where Zorvatha's holographic face hovered, smug as ever, its iridescent scales shifting in feigned concern. "Human Captain Reyes, your vessel's distress is regrettable, but the Council's blockade remains. Surrender the artifact, and aid will flow like the tides of Epsilon Prime." Zorvatha's words slithered through the speakers, each syllable laced with condescension. The alien's eyes, multifaceted and unblinking, seemed to pierce the bulkhead. Mia snorted, not looking up from her splice. They'd sooner dissect us for sport." Engines at 42%, that surge from their EMP fried the relays. "We push through this junkyard, we might make the jump point." Her caution showed in the precise twists of her wrench, every motion calculated to avoid a spark that could end them. Alex nodded, his mind racing through the schematics he'd memorized during those long hauls from Sol. The artifact, a crystalline data core stolen from Zorvatha's vaults, pulsed faintly in the hold, its secrets on human adaptability worth more than a fleet of Council dreadnoughts. But the blockade had turned the system's edge into a kill zone, and their early feint, posing as a neutral trader, had backfired spectacularly. Now, with shields down and fuel bleeding out, the cost was etching lines into his face. A proximity alarm blared, sharp and insistent. Debris loomed, a jagged spar from some forgotten warship, tumbling end over end. Alex yanked the yoke, the ship groaning as thrusters fired in uneven bursts. They skimmed past by meters, the hull shuddering from the near miss. "Too close." "Mia, reroute power to forward deflectors. We can't dance around this forever." She hesitated, her eyes flicking to the readouts. "That'll drain the core reserves. One bad hit, and we're adrift, easy pickings for their patrols." But her hands moved anyway, driven by the unspoken bond forged in tighter spots than this. Years of scraping by on frontier runs had taught them both. Hesitation killed quicker than arrogance. Zorvatha's hologram flickered, the alien leaning forward. "Foolish primates. Your ingenuity is but a spark against our eternal flame. The Council has weathered storms you cannot fathom." The words hung, a taunt wrapped in philosophy, but Alex caught the flicker of unease in those compound eyes, the first crack in the facade. "Save the poetry," Alex shot back, his tone steady, laced with wit that masked the fear coiling in his gut. "We're not here to weather your storms. We're here to outrun them." He punched the throttle, the ship lurching forward into the denser field. Chunks of metal whipped by, pinging off the hull like vengeful hail. Mia's voice cut through the chaos, urgent but calm. "Got a path, narrow but it'll thread the eye of this mess. Hold her steady." The console lit up with her overlay, a web of projected trajectories glowing green against the red storm outside. As they dove deeper, the first rail hit came, a glancing blow that sent sparks flying from the port panel. Alarms wailed, and Alex smelled the acrid tang of melting circuits. Pain shot through his shoulder where the harness bit in, but he held course, trusting Mia's map like a lifeline. Behind them, the Council's pursuit drones blinked into view on sensors, closing the gap with mechanical precision. Zorvath laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "Your patience frays human. Soon it snaps, and with it your fragile alliance." Alex's jaw tightened. The artifact's hum grew louder, syncing with his pulse, a reminder of what they'd lose if they failed. Not just the tech, but the proof that humanity wouldn't kneel. "Watch us snap back," he whispered to the void, guiding the ship through the narrowing gap. Debris framed their path like the jaws of some cosmic beast, and for a heartbeat, escape felt as tangible as the stars beyond. But the drones were gaining, and the jump point's beacon wavered, a distant promise amid the rising roar. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavor's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge was a cocoon of focused tension, screens flickering with data streams from the Alien Council's latest transmission. Her crew, small, tight-knit, human to the core, moved with a quiet efficiency born of too many close calls. Lieutenant Reyes at navigation, his fingers dancing over holographic controls, DR. Lena Kai in the corner, cross-referencing xenobiological scans, and Ensign Tarek, ever the steady hand, monitoring the shields. The Council's pride had swelled like a nebula after their generous offer. Join their alliance as junior partners or face isolation in the void. But humanity's patience wasn't infinite. Ilara had seen the subtext in their transmissions. The subtle dismissals, the assumption that humans were just another primitive species stumbling into the stars. No more. The Endeavor was humanity's fist, clenched and ready. "Status on the retrofit?" Ilara asked, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. Reyes glanced up, his dark eyes sharp. "Warp coils are at 87% efficiency, Captain. That jury-rigged fusion enhancer we pulled from the derelict is holding, but it's hot. One surge and we could fry the nacelles." She nodded, unperturbed. Humans didn't back down from heat, they thrived in it. The derelict they'd scavenged weeks ago, a forgotten council outpost, had been a gold mine. Not their sleek tech, but raw materials Ilara's team had twisted into something better suited to human grit. The enhancer was a beast, cobbled from salvaged plasma conduits and a touch of ingenuity that made the aliens' engineers look like amateurs. Kai leaned forward, her tablet glowing with readouts. "The Council's biosigns are spiking. They're prepping their fleet for a show of force. If we don't respond to their ultimatum in the next hour, we won't," Ilara interrupted, rising to pace the narrow bridge. The stars streaked past on the main viewer, a reminder of how small this standoff felt against the galaxy's expanse. The external challenge wasn't just the Council's armada looming on sensors, it was the resource drain. Their life support was straining under the constant evasive maneuvers, oxygen recyclers pushing limits after the sabotage on the outer hull. One wrong move, and the air would turn sour, the crew's breath shallow and labored. Tarek's console beeped, a proximity alert. "Incoming hail, Captain." "It's Admiral Krell himself." Ilara straightened, her jaw set. Krell, the Council's hawkish leader, with his iridescent scales and voice like grinding gravel. She'd faced his type before, overconfident, underestimating the monkeys from Sol. On screen, the viewer shimmered, resolving into Krell's angular face, flanked by advisors in ornate robes. His eyes narrowed, multifaceted like an insect's. "Human vessel Endeavor, your silence insults the Concordance. Submit coordinates for integration, or be deemed a rogue element." Ilara met his gaze, her expression calm but edged with steel. Admiral, we've reviewed your terms. Integration sounds like assimilation. We're not here to be your footnotes. Murmurs rippled through the alien ranks, but Krell's mandibles clicked in what passed for a laugh. Bold words from a single ship. Our fleet outnumbers you 10-1. Yield or your ingenuity ends in debris. The transmission cut, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Reyes swore under his breath. 10-1? That's not a fight, that's a slaughter. Not if we don't fight fair, Ilara said, turning to the crew. Her mind raced through the plan they'd hashed out in the dim hours after the last skirmish. The early attempt to negotiate had backfired spectacularly. The council had jammed their comms, forcing a retreat that cost them a shuttle and 2 engineers. No more talking. Time for adaptation. Kai, how's the viral payload? Ilara asked. The doctor tapped her screen, pulling up schematics of the council's network. Stable. Our codes of Frankenstein, human algorithms laced with that quantum backdoor we reverse-engineered from their probes. It'll slip into their command net like a ghost. But deployment means getting within striking range. Shields down for the hack. Tarek frowned. Risky. Their weapons lock in seconds. Ilara's lips quirked in a grim smile. Then we make them blink first. She activated the internal comm, all hands, battle stations. Reyes, plot a slingshot trajectory around that gas giant. Use its gravity to mask our approach. The ship groaned as thrusters fired, swinging them into the maneuver. Alarms blared softly, a rhythmic pulse matching the crew's quickened breaths. Ilara felt the familiar surge, fear laced with exhilaration. This wasn't melodrama, it was survival, raw and real. As they hurtled toward the giant's swirling clouds, sensors painted the council fleet in stark relief. Cruisers arrayed like predators, energy signatures humming with power. The Endeavor was a gnat by comparison, but gnats had ways of biting. Enhancer online, Reyes reported, sweat beading on his brow. Pushing to 105% output. She's straining cap. Hold her steady. Ilara watched the viewer. The gas giant storms a hypnotic blur of orange and red. One striking image burned in her mind. The council's lead ship, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian, oblivious to the shadows slipping through the haze. The hack initiated with a digital whisper, undetectable at first. Kai monitored from her station, fingers flying. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport churned with debris from the shattered asteroid belt, remnants of the council's botched mining operation that had nearly doomed them all. Marcus hunched over the auxiliary panel, sweat beading on his forehead, his fingers flying across the controls with the precision of a surgeon. It's holding barely, he muttered, voice tight. But if that plasma surge hits again, we're venting atmosphere faster than we can patch. Zorith floated nearby in the low-grav chamber, his iridescent scales flickering with agitation. The alien diplomat's mandibles clicked in what Elena had learned was frustration, not the disdain he'd shown during their initial negotiations. Your vessel is inadequate, he hissed, tentacles coiling around a handhold. The Council's fleet would have anticipated this. Humanity's impatience has led us here, to salvage your folly. She shot him a glare, biting back the retort that burned on her tongue. Instead, she focused on the flickering holograph, where the resource hauler drifted perilously close to the instability zone. Their mission had been simple: extract the rare isotopes the Council demanded as tribute, proving human worth in this interstellar Game of Thrones. But the belt's hidden fault line had triggered a cascade, turning abundance into a graveyard of rock and radiation. Now, with the hauler's engines failing and comms silent, the stakes weren't just diplomatic, they were survival. Impatience. Elena finally said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She straightened, meeting Zoritha's multifaceted eyes. We've been bending over backward for your superior protocols while your engineers ignored the seismic readings. Marcus, reroute power from life support. We can't lose that cargo. Marcus paused, his cautious nature surfacing in the furrow of his brow. Captain, that'll drop oxygen to critical in 10 minutes. We adapt or we die out here. He didn't wait for her nod, years of trust let him act. The hum of the ship shifted, a low growl as energy surged toward the docking clamps. Elena felt the air grow thinner, each breath a deliberate pull, sharpening her focus. Zoratha's form rippled, a sign of reluctant admiration, or was it calculation? You primitives risk everything for scraps. The council will not forget this desperation. But he moved to assist, his tentacles interfacing with the alien tech relay they jury-rigged earlier, bridging human ingenuity with his people's arcane systems. For the first time, no argument, just action. The hauler loomed larger, its hull scarred and listing. Elena initiated the grapple sequence, the clamps extending like desperate fingers into the void. A jolt rocked the ship as they latched, but the plasma wave crested then, a shimmering wall of ionized fury slamming into their shields. Lights dimmed, sparks flew from the console. Marcus cursed, slamming a manual override. Shields at 20%. We pull now or we're both debris. Elena thrust the controls forward, the engines whining in protest. The hauler resisted, tangled in a web of floating rubble, but inch by inch it yielded. Zoratha's input stabilized the link, his voice a urgent buzz over the din. Align the vectors. Your way, human. It works. As they cleared the worst of the surge, the hauler's comms crackled to life. A faint voice, human, pleading for extraction. Elena's heart pounded, not from fear but from the raw edge of triumph edging closer. They'd saved the cargo, the crew, but the council's fleet was en route, their pride demanding answers for the delay. And in the rear sensors a shadow stirred. The rival faction scout, lurking, waiting to exploit the chaos. The ship stabilized, but the cost lingered in the thinning air and the wary glance Zorath cast her way. Trust was forming, fragile as the isotopes they'd secured, but humanity's patience had limits, and this was the line. The chamber's air hummed with the low thrum of failing shields, the scent of scorched metal mingling with the acrid tang of alien incense that the council had insisted on burning for ceremonial clarity. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the edge of the negotiation table, her knuckles white against the polished obsidian surface. Her team, Dr. Liam Kerr, the wiry engineer with a perpetual squint from years staring into circuit boards, and Sergeant Mira Patel, whose steady gaze had silenced more than one heated debate, flanked her like silent sentinels. Across from them, the council elders shifted uneasily, their iridescent robes whispering against the floor, eyes darting to the holographic displays flickering with incoming fleet signatures. Elena's voice cut through the tension, steady as the hum of her ship's engines. You've seen the scans. Your blockade is crumbling under its own weight. Pull back now or we'll have to finish what you started. She didn't raise her tone, she didn't need to. The humans had proven that much already, first with the improvised EMP bursts that crippled the drone swarms, then with the jury-rigged fusion relays that turned the asteroid field into a makeshift barrier. No grand speeches, just results. Elder Thaler, the one with the most feathers ruffled in this metaphorically disastrous summit, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in what passed for frustration among his kind. You primitives presume too much. Our armada outnumbers. Numbers don't win wars, Mira interrupted, her words sharp as a vibro knife. She tapped the display, pulling up the latest feed. A coalition cruiser listing sideways, its hull breached by a human mining drone repurposed into a breaching charge. Yours do until they don't. We've lost 3 pilots today. Good people. You want to keep bleeding for pride. Liam adjusted his glasses, his fingers dancing over a portable console that linked directly to the human delegation's shuttle. He'd been the one to spot the flaw in the council's shield harmonics during the initial standoff. A resonance frequency they overlooked because their tech was too clean, too perfect. Humans built with flaws in mind, redundancy stacked like layers of scar tissue. The calculations don't lie, he said quietly, projecting a simulation that showed the inevitable cascade failure if the blockade held. Your ships will fracture from the inside out. We've already inverted the polarity on 2 of your forward emitters. It's not aggression, it's physics. The elder's compound eyes narrowed, reflecting the red glow of the alerts. Outside, through the viewport, the void churned with debris, shards of hull plating glinting like shattered stars. The challenge had started as a resource dispute over a neutral system's helium-3 deposits, the council dismissing human claims as quaint territorial squabbles. But humanity's response wasn't conquest, it was adaptation. Elena's crew had turned salvage into strategy, old freighters into decoys, and raw grit into a force that bent the odds. Thaler hesitated, his claws tapping a rhythm that echoed the distant booms of escaping atmosphere. The other elders murmured, a susurrus of concession. "Very well," he rasped at last. "The blockade withdraws. The deposits are shared." It wasn't surrender, not in their lexicon, but the weight of it hung in the air like the smoke from a dying fire. Elena nodded once, releasing her grip on the table. Relief washed through her, tempered by the ache of loss. Pilot Rhea's face flashed in her mind, gone in a flash of plasma. They filed out to the shuttle, the council's gaze heavy on their backs. As the engines roared to life, Liam patched through to the fleet. "Stand down. It's over." But in the quiet hum of acceleration, Mira broke the silence. "Shirtha. They'll test us again." Elena met her eyes, seeing the same resolve mirrored there. The stars stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving, a reminder that peace was just another adaptation, hard-won and fleeting. Humanity's patience had held, this time. But the void never forgot a debt.